Today we're going to talk about dividing decimals. When dividing decimals, there are 3 different types of problems you may be asked to solve. You may be asked to divide a decimal by another decimal, or divide a decimal by a whole number. And finally, you may be asked to divide a decimal into a whole number. In today's lesson, we're going to learn how to do all 3 of these division problems. The first way we're going to learn today is dividing a decimal by a whole number. So our first step when dividing a decimal by a whole number is to bring the decimal point in the dividend straight up into the quotient. That is always going to be our first step. Step number 2 is to divide the ones. So here we have 5 into 6, and we know that goes 1 time. But in the future, you may have problems. Let's say we have 5 into 2.5, where the 5 does not go into 2. Before moving on to 5 into 25, we want to make sure that we put a 0 above that 2 to show that 5 does not go into 2. So let's move on with our first example here. 5 times 1 is 5. And we're going to subtract and bring down the 1. Now we have 5 into 11, which goes 2 times. And we're going to bring our 8 down, and 5 into 18 is 3. Now we have no numbers to bring down here, so what we're going to do is annex a 0 and bring that all the way down, and now we have 5 into 30, which is 6, and 5 times, and we're at 0, and so our answer is 1.236. The next way we're going to talk about is dividing a decimal by a decimal. So here we have a decimal in the dividend and a decimal in the divisor. The first step is to move the decimal point in the divisor until it is a whole number. So here's my divisor. I'm going to move the decimal point 1 place over to make it a whole number 25. We're also here multiplying by a power of 10 because we're moving the decimal point over 1 place. Your next step is to move the decimal point in the dividend the same number of places. So here we moved it 1 place, so we're going to move it 1 place in the dividend as well. Your next step is to place a decimal point right above the dividend in the quotient. And we do that before we start dividing. So now we are ready to divide the numbers like we would with whole numbers. We have 25 into 142 and 5/10. So let's start our division. 25 into 142 goes 5 times. 25 times 5 is 125. And we are left with 175. And I got that from bringing this 5 down. 25 into 175 is 7. And that is 175, 0. So we are done with this problem. And our answer is 5 7/10. It is really important that you move that decimal point up right away before you start your dividing so you don't forget the place that it's supposed to be in. The last way we're going to learn about is dividing a decimal into a whole number. So here we have our dividend as a whole number and our divisor as a decimal. This is very similar to the example that we just did by dividing a decimal into a decimal. So our first step is to move the decimal point in the divisor until it is a whole number. So here we're going to move it again 1 time. And then we're going to do the same thing in the dividend, the same number of places. Now looking at our dividend, we don't have a decimal point like we did in the previous question. So we have a whole number. Now you guys all know that the decimal point for a whole number is always at the end. So let's go ahead and add that in. And now we need to move it one place over. What do you think we need to fill that space with? If you're thinking a 0, you are correct. So here we're going to annex a 0. Next step is to bring that decimal point straight up so we have it in our quotient. And now we are ready to divide. Okay, 25 into 14 we can't do. 25 into 145 goes 5 times. 25 times 5 is 125. Do our subtraction here and get 20. We'll bring down our 0 to make it 200, and 25 into 200 is 8. So our answer for this problem is 58. Here are 3 questions I would like you to try on your own in your notebook. You can use your notes, and remember to show all of your work. That includes the movement of your decimal point and bringing it straight up so that I can see that you have clearly understood the directions in our video.